Buenas tardes para todos, bienvenidos al webinar de la tarde de hoy. El tema es las entrevistas en inglés. Les voy a presentar a nuestro formador. Nuestro formador de la tarde de hoy es Andrew. Él ha trabajado enseñando inglés tras obtener su título en literatura inglesa a partir del año 1995. En el transcurso de su carrera, ha enseñado en San Francisco, Tokio y Madrid. Actualmente, Andrew tiene una escuela propia que se llama Anda Habla, ubicada en el centro de Madrid, donde se centran en el inglés, la preparación para exámenes y la preparación para entrevistas. De nuevo, bienvenidos y los dejo con Andrew.
So hello to everybody and happy Friday, specifically happy Friday the 13th. So as Kat said, my name is Andrew and I'm from Anda Habla. And of course I'm here to talk about job interviews in English, something that pretty much every professional has to deal with these days. So I work with a lot of different types of people. Sometimes I work with doctors or engineers or lawyers. Sometimes I work with bankers, managers or teachers, a lot of different types of people. And for me, one of the best things is that I get to work with people before they go on their interview. Sometimes I work with them during the interview process. And I also work with them after the interview process. And that gives me a lot of feedback on what happens during the process and what happens during the process for a lot of different types of people. And for me, one thing that's really surprising is that the process is really similar for engineers or computer programmers or managers. The process is often very, very similar, which is a surprise to me. But it seems to be true. And so today, I know that people are listening in their second language, and so thank you for that. I hope I am easy to understand. I also know that sound quality can be very different on different computers, and so I've made today's presentation very, very visual. So even if your sound equipment is not perfect, or even if your English is not perfect, I think that it will be easy to follow no matter what. So I hope it's comfortable for everybody. I hope it's easy for everybody. And today we're going to go over the top 10 questions that are asked in job interviews. And we're going to be talking about the professional advice and strategy, and especially language, what language you can use for all of these questions. And then after we finish those first 10 questions, we are going to look at some other factors which are going to apply to all questions, no matter what you get asked. So let's just go ahead and start. And so here we go with interviewing in English. And of course, one of the most important things is relax. It's just human interaction. Being nervous doesn't really help. So today we will speak about the top 10 job interview questions. And we have divided the content into 1, the dangers, 2, solutions, 3, language, and 4, other considerations. Other considerations are examples and things like that might be helpful. So here we go. The first one is tell me about yourself, which technically is not a question. I know, it's a statement. But it turns out that it's one of the most difficult statements to respond to. People think it's easy until they try to respond to it. And so let's first look at the danger. The danger is that this looks like an easy request, but it really isn't. And the problem here is that there are too many options. You know too much about your life. You have an encyclopedic knowledge of your life. You could say thousands of different things, and you have to choose very quickly what you want to say. So also, do not simply repeat or recite your CV. This is important not to do because it can insult the intelligence of the interviewer. These are intelligent people. They are prepared. They have already read your CV. They do not need you to read it to them again. Trust me, they will not respond well if you do that. So let's go ahead and move forward here. Strategy. So the strategy is going to be the 4-sentence frame, followed by the past, followed by the present. So if you noticed in the first picture, the man was surrounded by a frame. And so the frame is just 4 sentences that tell us a little bit about yourself. So here's more information. The 4-sentence frame quickly and efficiently establishes you as a person. This is essential even for highly technical jobs. They don't need to know every detail of your life, but it's human nature to want to know the basics. Many people get very nervous and start with the professional qualifications. Do not do this. The interviewer is not going to feel really comfortable with you until they get at least a little bit of an idea of who you are. So after you establish the frame very quickly in 30 seconds, then fill it in with your professional profile. And so here's what it might look like. You might want to start with something very basic, very simple English. As you may know, I come from Cuenca. Really easy. Number 2, I'm from a big, tight-knit family. There are 5 of us in my family, plus in-laws and nieces and nephews. Once again, very basic English. When I'm not working, I enjoy playing football, seeing my friends, and doing cultural things. So also very, very relaxed, very casual language. It is a human interaction after all. And the final sentence is, of course, a big emphasis in my life right now is the growth of my career. So everybody knows why we're here in an interview. Let's be very forward and upfront about that. So just establish yourself very simply as a human being, and then we can talk about who you are as a professional. So the past, now we can transition into your professional profile. So here, try to include phrases that show that your profession is part of your passion, part of who you are, and not just a job. And we'll give some examples of that. So you can say things linguistically. You can say, even as a kid, I loved debating. Eventually, I joined the debate club in high school. When I went to university, studying law seemed like a natural choice. So once again, this is beyond just, well, I went to university and, well, I had to choose something. No. I went to university and my dad said I should study law. No. We want passion here. We want passion, and we want a profound motivation. That's going to be, those are going to be the people who are the best employees. And now you can transition into your present. So we've gone from frame to past, now from past to present. And the present is, I'm currently looking for a place where I can develop my career. I'm interested in getting more experience and training, and I'm specifically interested in, and a theme today is going to be specific, specific, specific. A really big theme today is going to be avoid anything that is general or cliche. And so be as specific as you can about specialization you're interested in, software you're interested in, anything that you can show something very specific that will be more memorable to the interviewer, to show that you are switched on, you are thinking, and you're not just there to say a bunch of general statements or cliches. So the language here, I think, is really important. Once again, we don't want to insult the person who's interviewing us. So, of course, you will restate or repeat some of the information on your CV. When you do this, to avoid insulting the interviewer, use phrases like, as you may know, or as I wrote on my CV, or as you may have seen on my CV. Once again, we know that they are intelligent. We know that they are prepared. We know that they have read our CVs. So don't say, you know, I have a degree in business. They know. That's why they called you. That's why you're sitting in that chair, is because you have a degree in business. We're at the interview to give some extra information or some new perspectives on information they might already have. And we'll talk about that next. So other considerations here are try to avoid simply restating items on your CV. I'm repeating. So here are some strategies for doing that. A, include new information. B, put existing information in context. And C, connect information to show larger patterns. And I'm going to give examples of all of this stuff, guys. So some good language here could be not mentioned on my CV is a course I recently took, blah, blah, blah. A training I recently received, blah, blah, blah. A project I recently successfully completed on, etc. So anything. You can bring new information there. Also, put existing information in context. For example, I didn't go into detail about this, but my experience working in Japan were pivotal in terms of cross-cultural understanding. So you can expand on certain information you've already mentioned. And connect information to show larger patterns. So if you'll notice, I have consistently worked for smaller startups. I really like the dynamic environment and the opportunity to take on all types of responsibilities. So once again, just put that in the context of larger patterns there that might be helpful for them to A, individuate yourself, differentiate yourself, become more memorable, and just to give them more information in general. And a quick anecdote here. Years ago, I trained a woman for an interview, and she was a talented and experienced MBA. She had a good level of English, and she did quite well, but sounded a bit generic during the interview process that I did with her. And as we were putting on our coats, she happened to mention that she was headed to the pool. And I said, oh, you swim? And she said, oh, I swam professionally for 5 years. At university, I had to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. just to train. And I personally couldn't believe that she hadn't used that information in the interview. I think it says a lot about dedication, about hard work, consistency, focus, excellence. And as far as I was concerned, the story was gold. So I forced her to take off her coat. I forced her to redo the interview process with me and incorporate that information, because I feel that she wasn't giving herself enough credit. And I feel that just because she hadn't read that answer in an interview book or heard another person give that answer, she felt it wasn't normal and she couldn't do it. But of course, we're at the interview to differentiate. We're not at the interview to be generic. So I encourage people strongly. I encourage people to use their personal information or the things that make them unique. And to be honest, almost all of the people I work with forget that. I have to tell them that they're special. I have to tell them that they're unique. I have to tell them that they're different from other people. I don't know why, but I guess it doesn't occur to them, because to them, I think their life feels quite normal. And to other people, being a professional swimmer maybe sounds really impressive. It sounds very impressive to me. So apparently she thought that was normal. So keep in mind things like this. So the next consideration here is a question that is very direct, and it can make you feel very uncomfortable. Why should I hire you? And what everybody has to remember is that hiring someone is a very expensive process. Not paying your salary, but training you is a very expensive process. And so when they're looking at you, they're seeing above you, they're seeing a price tag. And by the way, 25,000 euros is actually a very conservative estimate. Estimates are actually often much higher. So you've got to imagine that you've got to give a good enough answer to justify this price tag above your head, which could be a pretty big price tag. So once again, people here are often too general and often too modest. People forget that training a new employee is a very expensive process, easily 25,000 euros. And this is your chance to make your case directly. Why are you worth the investment? Why are you worth $25,000? You get one opportunity to answer this question. So I know your mom told you to be modest. I know your mom told you not to be arrogant. Well, mom didn't mean that in the interview. In the interview, we're going to talk about that, how you can sound confident but not arrogant. So we'll talk about that. But you need to be very clear about why you are a strong candidate and state your ideas and support them with, once again, specific reasons. Don't be general. You're here to be differentiated. You're not here to be generic. And here we go with language. Use language that is confident but not arrogant. And so here we'll give some examples. A lot of people don't feel comfortable with things like, I'm the best person for the job. I personally would never say that. I think that sounds horribly arrogant. But things that you could say that have a very similar meaning are, I think I'm a strong candidate because X, Y, Z. I feel I could bring a lot to this position because, be very specific. I think my background has prepared me for this position because blah, blah, blah. So I think those are all really great ways to sound confident, but not arrogant. So I think that is pretty key linguistically. I think those are really key in terms of answering this question. Some others here are, I think my track record shows, given my level of experience, I think this position is a good fit. And finally, I'm ready for this challenge because. So just depending on the position you're applying for, and also, of course, depending on your personality, just choose something that feels comfortable for you. Other anecdotes here is recently I worked with a talented young trilingual accountant. He did a competent interview, but he didn't really differentiate himself. He sounded like 99% of the people who are in this position. You know, he's saying, I'm punctual, I'm a team player, I'm hardworking, and that sounds like every other person, absolutely every other person. After the interview, you mentioned that he had his own, and I said, oh, maybe that's where you get your math skills. And his answer surprised me. His answer was, no. He said, my dad can hardly do math. Even as a kid, I had to do all his accounting for him. Once again, the information is golden. If you've been working as an accountant since you were 10 years old, you're probably pretty serious about that job. So we did the interview again, and we managed to incorporate that information into his introduction as a way of showing the depth of his experience. So once again, think hard about your life and think about what you have in your life that other people don't. You know, ask yourself, am I a professional swimmer? Ask yourself, have I been working as an accountant since age 10? Anything else that might be unique to you, make sure and use those things. Here's the next question. What is your long-range objective? And if you're not prepared for this, this can leave you sort of speechless. Like, exactly how do you explain where you want to be in 5 or 10 years? And how do you do that in the context of a job interview? So the danger here is giving an answer that doesn't fit with the corporate structure. If they are going to hire you, they want time to recuperate their investment. And they don't want you leaving because, for example, there aren't enough advanced positions in the company. You know, if there's only one if there's only one manager in the company and that person that is interviewing you maybe you shouldn't say, I want to be manager, because that would be taking their position. Come on. You've got to be mindful of what the corporate structure is here. So the solution here is to focus on excellence and supporting the organization and being the best resource for them. So the language here, the language you can use is, I want to be the go-to person when there are problems. I want to be using my experience to mentor others. And the other one is, I want to continue to be on the learning curve in this fast-changing industry. So the learning curve is, of course, the curve on a graph like this, and it is really, really a very popular phrase in business culture. Everybody wants to be on the learning curve or get back on the learning curve if they haven't had a very interesting, dynamic job in which they were able to learn. Everyone says, yeah, I want to get back on the learning curve. So it's one of those things that managers or the hiring authority really like to hear in an interview. They like to hear certain language about being proactive or being on the learning curve. There's some vocabulary that is very sort of magical in terms of convincing them that you are a serious candidate. And we can talk about that. I don't know if we're going to talk about that a lot today, but maybe we can talk about that another time. Here's a standard one. How has your education prepared you for your career? And so this is a standard question, and a lot of people don't really take full advantage of this question to differentiate themselves. So the solution here is to take the opportunity to talk about the success of specific, once again, specific projects, or the effect of certain classes. So some language here that would be really useful would be, my internship really bridged the gap between theory and practice. Or continuously doing group projects forced us to learn the teamwork skills necessary to blah, 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 blah. And because my thesis was on X, I became very aware of a certain part of the industry, a certain part of the job. Maybe it was software, or maybe it was a particular market or a particular technique or something like that. So yeah, really take advantage, once again, to show how specifically you are prepared for this job. And the next one is the classic of classics, really. Are you a team player? And I also think this is one of the questions that is kind of what we would call a jackpot in terms of you being able to really show a lot of your positive qualities, both professional and personal, and we'll talk about that. So everyone knows the correct answer to this is yes. Everyone knows that, I know. But the trick is to really maximize the effect with an interesting and effective example. And so the solution here is you can use a lot of different types of examples from your personal and professional life. Did you or do you play volleyball? That's definitely a team effort. That's an incredibly intense team effort. Did you or do you work with a group of people serving food to homeless? Once again, it's a different type of teamwork. It's not necessarily professionally related, but it could require a lot of coordination and a lot of communication, a lot of keeping people's spirits up, etc. Have you been on work teams or committees that had to perform under difficult circumstances? If you can refer to a difficult circumstance that your team successfully survived, that would be ideal. So the language here is going to be make frequent use of the word we. So this should be we. Avoid too many I statements. So things like, we had to work closely to accomplish our aim. We had to have clear communication in order to reach our goals. The flexibility of all team members was key, and there's a few more here. We often had to compensate for some of the newer team members. We had to pull some long hours, but in the end, it was worth it. And the final one here is we had to trust that everyone was doing their share or would tell us if they ran into problems. So once again, really focusing there on communication, supporting other people, and supporting people who might not have skills which are as strong, professional skills, technical skills, communication skills, stress management skills. All of those skills you can hopefully give very specific examples of helping out a team member who was kind of having a little emotional collapse, or a great brainstorming session that created some new alternatives for your team. Other considerations, an anecdote. So I was recently working with a computer specialist who is working in the medical industry. And after asking a lot of questions about her background and sort of getting to know her story, which, as I've said many times, is key, is being very aware of your own story and where your story is different from other people's story. I suggested she give the following answer. I suggested she say, as the oldest of 4 daughters, I think I've always been a team member. Set a good example, help others, make sure everyone is doing what they should be or getting help. These were the lessons that were reinforced every day. I still have those habits and they help a lot at work. So once again, maybe you think that your personal life is irrelevant. I have found that personal lives are often extremely relevant. And so don't be afraid to use some of that information. You know, obviously you should be speaking a great deal about your professional qualifications, but I think there's definitely 15%, 20, 25% where you can talk about other things that are from your personal life that could have a lot of relevance on how you behave at work, how you solve problems, how you communicate with people, how you lead teams, etc., etc., etc. So, oh no, the conflict question. This is another question which I think makes people very nervous. And the reason, of course, it makes people nervous is because there's a good chance that you're going to reveal an imperfection here. Something imperfect that happened at work, or something imperfect in your character, or something like that. So the danger is don't pretend that you've never encountered conflict. All people, all adults, all professionals have dealt with conflict in the workplace. And if you say otherwise, if you say no, or if you say I've never had that, you will look dishonest. You will look like a liar. And be genuine, be real with these people. They're going to make a really big investment in you. As I said, minimum $25,000 just to train you. If they're going to be making that investment in you, you owe it to them to be frank, to be honest, and you can really use this to your advantage as well. So the solution here, the solution is going to be to give a specific example of a difficult situation that you had to resolve, and focus how you were instrumental in the positive outcome. And so the language here is going to be anything that reinforces that point. I'll give a lot of examples here. Some of them are really simple, and some of them are a little bit longer. We'll start with the longer one. So the first one, by stepping back from the situation, I was able to get some perspective. When I put myself in his or her shoes, I was able to understand the core of the conflict. Number 3, I scheduled some time with him or her to brainstorm possible solutions. So that makes you look like quite an innovative problem solver and quite a good communicator. Other things, very, very simple. I suggested, I recommended, I thought a compromise would be, I saw X as the way forward, I saw mediation as the way forward, I saw whatever as the way forward, and I devised a plan in which X, Y, Z. And one note here, one linguistic note here is that compromise is a false friend. Compromise seems to mean one thing in Spanish and quite another in English. Compromise in English and sometimes in Spanish means when two people both accept maybe a second option as a way of agreeing. It sometimes has a different meaning in Spanish, so do be quite careful with that word. I hear a lot of people make sentences or structures that sound very, very strange in the English language, so be very mindful of that particular word. I've heard some people make big mistakes with that. And what is your biggest weakness? This is possibly the question that makes people the most nervous. And other people think that they've got a clever solution, and sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes the solution turns out is not so clever. And so we'll look at some clever things and some not so clever things. So the danger here is panicking or giving it an obviously prepared and cliche answer. Do not, I repeat, do not say, you know, I'm just a perfectionist, I have to do everything perfect, or I'm just not satisfied. So that's not clever. No, that was clever 25 years ago or 20 years ago or something, but everybody has been giving the same answer for decades. And I suspect they'll just ask for a real answer if you give that. So what should you do? Here's what I think is a good strategy. The solution here is turn this scary weakness question into a victory story. So to turn a negative into a positive, and choose a past weakness that you identified and either solved or are working on solving. So they asked for a weakness, and you're doing that. You're kind of just giving a past weakness. That's the only real twist on this. And you know, you can say you're still working on it, but if you do say that, just emphasize how much progress you have made. That would be key here. So an example. Let's look at an example here of the language. So you might start by talking about a bit of, you know, really a bit of humility, a bit of modesty or humbleness. You know, I had to face the fact that X, some negative thing. I had to really examine my behavior. So it looks like you're a very conscious or conscientious employee, potential employee. I had to make some serious changes. So that makes it sound like you're a flexible person, that you're capable of change. I took a class, I read a book, I watched some helpful videos. So here you make yourself look very proactive. You are trying to anticipate future problems and create a strategy in advance to avoid future problems. And of course, that is the definition of being proactive, and that is pretty much the definition of being a good employee. So other considerations here, an example answer. So you could say something like this. You could say, you know, a few years ago, I had to face the fact that I was feeling overwhelmed. So overwhelmed is something you can't handle, you can't manage, you can't deal with. It's too much, you're beyond your limits. So I had to face the fact that I was feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information I dealt with every day. I asked other friends in similar positions how they did it. I got some great advice. I read a fantastic book on managing information and responsibilities. I watched a lot of helpful videos, and in the end I realized that I needed to create a strong external system of organization. I restructured my files, I reassessed how I was using technology, and I downloaded some great new software. Now I finally feel on top of my workload. And so, I don't know what other people feel about this question or this answer, this potential answer. I feel it's a really strong answer, and the reason I feel this is because I think this is sort of the crisis of our generation. The crisis of our generation is that, the human brain is actually pretty small and pretty limited. And the amount of information that we're responsible for is enormous and getting bigger every day. The amount of projects we're supposed to follow, the amount of emails we're supposed to read, the amount of meetings we're supposed to attend or have a knowledge of, et cetera, et cetera. And unless you have an incredibly strong external system of organization, any human being is going to collapse under that. And I think that this is just fantastic because it is true for everybody. And so I think that in that way, it can be a great answer. And if it begins to sound a bit cliche, because maybe many people give it, all you have to do is then just say, well, no, seriously, look, this is the reality of my working day. I get 100 emails a day. I am responsible for 12 projects. And this specifically, once again, not to be cliche, not to be general, but this specifically is how I have decided to manage all of that information. So I think that it is a general answer, but it can very easily be made kind of catered to or specified to or tailored to each individual. So I think that could be a great solution to panicking or giving that other cliche answer, which I think is no longer relevant. So next here is if we were to ask your colleagues, boss, classmates to describe you, what would they say? So, this is uncomfortable for a couple of reasons. People talking about you is a little uncomfortable. And also, many people are not comfortable saying positive things about themselves. Because once again, our mom told us not to be arrogant. Our mom told us to be humble, and probably your friends have, if you've been arrogant, your friends have said, shut up, don't be arrogant. And so we get this message from many, many people that we're not supposed to say positive things. But let's think about this. If there is a price tag over your head that says, this person, to train them, is going to be 25,000 euros, 30,000 euros, maybe 50 or maybe more. We really need to know that you're a pretty impressive person, and no one else is going to say it for you. You have to say it for you. And so you've got to be prepared for it, and then you've got to be able to communicate it pretty effectively. And once again, let's think about this. In a job interview, how much time do you have to make a good impression? 7 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes if you're lucky. So you can't wait for them to maybe ask you the perfect question that you're waiting for. You kind of have to just put it out there. You have to be a little bit assertive, and you just have to put the information out there. And so here are some suggestions. So the danger here is do not give a short series of idealized adjectives. I'm helpful, I'm hardworking, I'm punctual. Everybody says that. Everybody says that. You are not differentiating yourself. You're making yourself look very generic. One real, detailed answer is more powerful and more memorable than 100 generic adjectives. It's very important. So real answers, human beings are very good at detecting what is authentic. They're very, very good at detecting what is rehearsed, what is a cliche, what is general, and what is for real. So allow yourself to be for real in the interview process. And one way to think about all of this is that if you think about the person who is conducting the interview, they don't want to be bored. They don't want to sit there and stare at somebody who is nervous and somebody who is, just giving generic answers. They want to be impressed. Maybe they want to be entertained. They definitely want to know, wow, this person is great. So just one way that can be helpful is just to think about their point of view. Just think, they don't want to be bored. They probably heard the same conversation 6 times today. How can you say something that is going to actually wake them up a little bit? Another way to think about it is, if you were the boss, what sort of candidate would you want to talk to? Be the candidate that you would want to be interviewing. And we might have time to talk about that later today. But let's continue with this particular answer right now, which is solution. Tell a story about a time when your positive qualities were publicly recognized. And so the language here is, I was flattered when my manager said. So flattered is when you felt very good, and when you felt very good and you were very complimented when somebody said something. Everyone agreed that the campaign had been a success. People were always saying, she is great at IT or whatever. In the office, I became known as the mediator, the negotiator, whatever, that was either recognized by an individual or recognized collectively, maybe in your office. And other considerations. Oh, an anecdote. A young man trained as a teacher gave the following answer to this question. One day I had a fever, but went to my university literature classes anyway. As I was leaving class, the professor, also head of the department, stopped me and said, "We need to talk," in a stern voice. She said, "You didn't speak today." The man said, "I don't feel well, and there are 89 other people who also didn't speak. Why are you talking to me?" She said, "My classes work for 2 reasons. You and Margaret. You guys speak and get the other students speaking. When you two don't speak, my classes don't work. No more quiet days." So it was a type of compliment. It came as kind of it came in kind of an aggressive way. It came in kind of a pretty assertive way, a bit of a harsh way, perhaps. But, in the end, it was a big compliment. That guy was academically a leader. And so, if he is going to go into teaching, that's going to really benefit him and his students and the administration and the academic institution in general. So once again, that's much stronger than just saying, helpful, hardworking, punctual. Don't do that. Don't. So tell stories. Tell stories. Human beings are very impressed by stories. They remember stories. At the end of the day, they're not going to remember a person who said 3 adjectives. At the end of the day, they are going to remember the person who told that amazing story about waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and being a professional swimmer. That amazing story about that 10-year-old kid who was doing his father's accounting for him. They're going to remember those stories. Human beings remember stories more easily than information, which is really important in this process. And describe the ideal manager. The danger here is similar to other dangers mentioned. Merely reciting a few standard adjectives is neither effective nor memorable. And this will not differentiate you. To say well organized or all of these adjectives, those get forgotten. Those get forgotten very quickly. So here's what you do. The solution. You might want to list some adjectives. There's nothing wrong with adjectives. You might do a list of adjectives, but you also have to make reference to a specific person or a specific theory to support your idea. Take the opportunity to show that you are an aware and reflective person who has considered these issues carefully. So show that you actually have thoughts on the subject. So the language here could be, in my opinion, my stance on this is very similar to my opinion on this is. I have always believed that. That makes it sound like you've thought about it not only deeply, but for a long period of time. Contrary to popular belief, This could be interesting. This means that you are different than other people, that you have thought about it, analyzed the average person, and have come to a different conclusion. New findings show, so new studies show, new statistics show. So that means that you've read recent information about management theory, for example. Additional considerations, example, answer. So here's something you could say. Years ago, I heard a manager talking about leadership. He said, I am not the top of the pyramid, I am the center of the circle. This is a great view of management. The team doesn't always benefit from somebody shouting orders from the top. It is better to have a central figure coordinating the efforts of the group. So I think this is a good answer because I think that many things have changed, let's say in the last 25 or maybe even 50 years, and there has been a real transition from a hierarchical approach to management where we have the person on top and then everybody else below them in this massive hierarchy to really trying to develop each person, to get the most out of each person by allowing them to be a bit freer, a bit more empowered, etc. And I think that this answer is in line with the way society has changed, and the way management theory has changed, and the way businesses have changed. Most businesses have become less hierarchical, have become flatter, as they often say in business. So the next one is, if you had your life to live over again, what one thing would you change? So if you had to hit the reset button, oh my gosh. So the danger here is saying that you would change everything, and that makes your life look extremely mismanaged. You don't want to do that. So the solution, what's the solution? Say that you are generally happy with your life, but there is one simple thing that you would like to change. And here's some language. Here, the second and third conditionals are going to be really helpful. I think that's pretty obvious. If I had my life to live over again, I would start studying English earlier. If I had joined that networking club earlier, I would have. If I had realized earlier that my real interest was management, not marketing, etc., etc. So just have in your mind maybe one small change that you could make to your job, but you know, don't be surprised when they ask this, because it is a pretty standard question. And so that finishes up the 10 questions, and one of the questions was a statement. I know that. 9 questions and a statement. So before we end, let's comment on some other essential factors here. And this will be your base, no matter what is asked in the interview. And I wish we had more time today, because I would like to talk about strategies that are not based on 10 questions they might ask you, but are based on whatever might happen. And I have a whole nother sort of set of exercises and strategy for dealing with chaos, dealing with the fact that you don't know what they're going to ask you. And I would love to talk about that today, but I don't think there's going to be time. But let's talk about some of these other factors that are going to be relevant in any situation. So confidence. And really quickly here, I used to work at a school in the financial district of San Francisco. And every week we would get a plane load of new students from all over the world. And as a manager, it was my job to have a quick conversation with each person to get an idea of their spoken level. I'd ask something generic like, what did you do this summer? And I noticed something strange. Confidence. Low-level students would nervously say, I went to the beach. I went with my friends. We had fun. We drank beer. I like the beach. It is good. I will return. That is all. What? It sounded weird. And high-level students would say, not much. But they would look so confident that I immediately knew that they were C1 or C2. And so it was kind of the inverse of maybe what you would think. You would think a low-level student wouldn't talk, and a high-level student would say a lot of things. But it really, my assessment was based a lot on confidence. And I would automatically know the levels in spite of the effort the low-level student had made for a low-level student. But they lacked confidence. It always sounded rehearsed or practiced. And the fluent students weren't nervous with a single word, and often before I even spoke to them, I could see they were confident in that situation, and I knew already their level. I would know their levels. So the grammar test always confirmed my suspicions. So remember to be confident, A, but also remember that you don't have to prove too much with your language. You don't have to try to use a phrasal verb in every sentence. You don't have to try to use, negative adverbs and inverted structures. You don't have to try that hard. You can keep things real simple, actually. And you guys, this is really, really important. Salutations just means hi. Most people don't know basic salutations. For example, how are you doing? For example, is identical to how are you. It refers to your state and not your activity. So most candidates get confused, even high-level candidates get confused and start talking about what they did that morning. And the interviewer has just said, how are you? And suddenly the candidate said, I was on the metro and I was on the bus and I ate breakfast and I took a shower and I looked for your office. And the person giving the interview is wondering, why are they talking about the metro? Why are they talking about taking a shower? What are they talking about? And it's because the person didn't understand the salutation. You guys have to know your salutations, practice them. And here's one. I don't know how much time I've got left. I've got just a couple of seconds. I think this is really important. And, I have to speak Spanish in a lot of my life. And I know that it can be difficult. And I know that you get tired of saying, what? You feel like you're being annoying. And maybe you are. And maybe I am when I'm speaking Spanish. So 50 shades of what? Because the interview will not be in your first language, you will probably want to occasionally say what. So to avoid sounding repetitive or childlike, learn variations. So here are a lot of variations. You can say, hey, can you repeat that? Or I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean. Or can you rephrase that? Or in other words, what you're asking me is, and sorry. So you guys keep in mind that when I'm in an interview in the English language, I do this too. I clarify what people are asking me. I clarify what sorts of information they're asking for. So it doesn't reflect badly on your second language abilities at all. Some other things here. Confirmation questions. The confirmation questions here are very similar to what. The difference is that the listener wants to confirm that they have heard correctly. The problem is that different languages form these questions differently. Spanish and English are not the same. There's a very crucial, important, essential difference. So a question, imagine a question like, do you work weekends? They might ask that. The Spanish confirmation question is, if I work weekends, and the English confirmation question is, do I work weekends? Now, this is a really big problem. This is a really big problem, guys, because the Spanish response is the beginning of a conditional structure in English. For this reason, we are waiting for you to finish your sentence. We're waiting and waiting and waiting. And the Spanish person thinks that he or she has finished his or her question, and they're waiting for the confirmation. So they're waiting and waiting. And so as you can imagine, the result is a long, uncomfortable, confused. So it's just confusing, guys. The good news is that the English confirmation questions are really simple. You just repeat. Do you like ice cream? Do I like ice cream? Do you work weekends? Do I work weekends? You change the intonation. And you change the pronoun. and you change the intonation and the pronoun, but it's really easy. So just don't start with the conditional. I know it's going to be reflexive or natural, since Spanish for many people is probably the first language and the structures are different. So maybe I've got time for one more here very quickly. Body language. And so when we are nervous, we forget good body language. And so practice with someone who will interview you and tell you when you are forgetting. You need an external source to tell you when you're forgetting, because your mind is going to be so focused on the interview that your mind will forget to track or to think about how you are appearing. So are you maintaining eye contact? Are you crossing your arms? Are you smiling once a minute? I would recommend smiling once a minute. Are you leaning forward to show interest? Is your intonation flat, or are you being engaging? Do you have an animated tone? And are you tapping your feet or showing other nervous habits? And guys, I think that's probably all I have time for. One final one here, one very last one is kiss. So I'll leave you with a kiss. How's that? Kiss is, in English, kiss means keep it simple, stupid. So this is kind of from, business English, and they just sometimes mean that the simplest solutions are the best. So in the interview, use simple language and structures you are familiar with. So use stuff that's comfortable for you, and don't make your communication too complicated. So I have students who speak beautifully every day, and then they try to do an interview and they say something weird, like, had been being learned for years at university. That makes no sense. That's crazy grammar. That's crazy. And it's because the person is trying too hard. They're trying to use, I don't know, a future perfect progressive or a past perfect progressive or third conditional. I don't know what they're trying to do, but people who speak well or who speak really well every day make these crazy mistakes. So you can just say really simple. You can do a lot of it in present simple. No big deal. It's okay. It's going to be more important the content you're conveying and the confidence you're conveying. And so I guess I'm leaving you with that kiss. And so thank you very much for tuning in. I really hope that this can improve your ability to interview in English and feel more confident or comfortable in English, all of those things. And so I've got some, I think I'm going to zip you through a million of these, and there is thanks. There's thanks with, once again, the name of my school and some contact information if you should need to contact me, ask advice, all those things. So I hope everybody has a good weekend. I hope everybody has a good Friday the 13th. And who knows, maybe we'll see each other again in this forum or something else. So that's it. So bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye.
Okay, thank you to Talentous for having me. Okay, ciao.
Bye.